Greetings! On behalf of YTM, welcome aboard. Enjoy your flight.
If you love to travel and want to stay in the loop with all the latest tips, reviews, and updates, be sure to hit that subscribe button and don't forget to like and share. We do appreciate the support. And here's our flight for the day. We'll be flying from Denpasar, Bali to Singapore on flight SQ939 in business class on Singapore Airlines 787-10. And this will actually be our first experience flying the 787-10 with Singapore Airlines. And we were really looking forward to this flight, as Singapore Airlines business class is usually at the top of many people's lists, and their customer service is generally second to none. So Bali was on the last leg of this little adventure. We started our journey in Japan, spent a few days in Singapore, and rounded out our travels in this beautiful Indonesian paradise. And if you've never been to Bali before, I think you should definitely add it to your travel list so you could experience this captivating, beautiful, and spiritual island for yourself. And if interested, we have a video on top sites to see in Bali. Now let's take a look at our booking for this rather short 2-hour and 45-minute flight. We booked this entire flight on points. Let's show you the breakdown. We transferred these points from Chase to Aeroplan with a 20% transfer bonus, which is always nice. So basically we transferred 146,000 points, received a bonus of 29,200 points to get the 175,000 points needed for 2 tickets, plus taxes and fees of course. This was for 2 one-way tickets that included 2 flights with an extra long layover in Singapore. And you might have some interest in signing up for Singapore Airlines KrisFlyer program. There are some advantages. Now let's look at Singapore Airlines carry-on bag allowance for this flight. Not incredibly generous, but when you couple this with your personal items, I don't think most people will have an issue with this limit. Now let's take a look at your checked bag allowance. And these are for flights starting and ending in the USA or Canada. A very generous 2-bag limit of 32 kilograms each. Now, if you're traveling to any other country besides the US and Canada, your standard checked bag for business class would be 40 kilograms, which isn't as generous, but should be sufficient. Now let's look at getting to the airport. The Denpasar Airport in Bali is located close to most of the tourist areas, except for some of the northern regions like the very popular Ubud, and we believe the best ways of traveling around Bali are by Grab car or private driver. We recommend downloading the Grab car app. It's easy to use and very convenient. But for getting to the airport, the private driver that took us around to most sites in Bali dropped us off at the airport, which worked out well for us. Now let's take a look at checking in to our flight on Singapore Airlines. You could either check in at the check-in counter or go to the Singapore Airlines app, and generally it's a very simple and fluid process to check in online. Now, arriving in Bali was a very quick and easy process. We have a video out on top tips for Bali that will help you streamline this process, but you should definitely arrive to the airport early. Between check-in, passport control, and security, it took us over 2 hours, and that's being in business class where we had a much shorter line at check-in. But if you're flying economy, plan on waiting a little longer. Of course, your mileage may vary depending on the flights that day and the time you fly, but at this airport, it's a good idea to get there a little earlier. We did, so fortunately, we had enough time to check out the lounge. We gained entry to the Tujuwan Lounge via our business class flight on Singapore Airlines. This lounge was recently rebranded, and the previously named lounge didn't receive the best reviews, but we believe they improved with this rebrand. There's space upstairs, outside, well, overlooking the terminal, and downstairs. And just be aware, at least at the time we went, they only had air conditioning in the downstairs section. Now let's take a little closer look at some of the food served at the lounge. We were here during lunch. They had a buffet with a variety of hot dishes, and in addition to the buffet, they had some sandwiches, salads, fruit, and a few dessert options. Now, I wouldn't say the food here was gourmet, but I think it was better than some of the reviews made it out to be. And as far as your beverage choices, you had soda, water, fresh juices, coffee, and actually a nice list of drinks to grab from the bar. Now, while this lounge might not top our best lounge list, it was a good place to grab a bite, a beer, and a martini before our flight. Now let's look at our boarding process. Singapore Airlines has a pretty standard boarding process. First off, you have passengers who require special assistance, then first class, and then us in business class. So we checked the departure board in the lounge. It looks like our flight is on time. So we finished our drinks and headed to our gate. And I always like to check to make sure our plane is there. And fortunately, it was. And I found it interesting. As we passed through the gate, they had two paths to the jetway. Business passengers had an escalator. Economy passengers used the stairs. Also, business passengers were able to board in the front of the plane. So there was no waiting. And I'm not really accustomed to no line at all while walking through the jetway, even in business class. Except, of course, when I'm running really late for a flight. And we didn't have a long walk to our seat, as we were sitting in the second row of business class. And in addition to the convenient boarding process, another aspect I like of Singapore Airlines is that they refer to you by your surname. Just another one of the features that makes Singapore Airlines top in the service field. Now let's take a little look at our seats on our Singapore Airlines 787-10 in business class. Here they provide you a little information on the regional business class on Singapore Airlines. But now let's take a look at the seat map. There was no first class on this plane, so the first section was our business class, followed by 2 economy class cabins. But let's go back and take a closer look at our cabin. The business class cabin is in a 1-2-1 configuration with 2 bathrooms in the front and 2 in the rear. So when I first booked this flight through Aeroplan, I didn't have the correct seat map through their site, so I booked us seats in the center section that weren't directly next to each other, and as you will soon see, it really wasn't a big issue. We were sitting in row 12, seats D and F, and these seats worked out just fine for this short flight, and we usually prefer to get our seats towards the front of the plane. And here you can get a global view of our business class cabin with its muted colors and its comfortable, relaxed feel. And here's my seat for the next 2.5 hours or so, 12D.
Welcome aboard Singapore Airlines. As the safety equipment on this aircraft may differ from that on other aircraft, please give us your attention as we bring you through this important safety briefing and on a journey through Singapore.
The seat itself in business class was quite comfortable, and it seemed to be spacious enough for me. And the headrest itself had substantial padding, which is always nice. Let's take a little look at the view from where we're sitting, and there seemed to be plenty of space to store our items. As you can see, Lily used the hook to store a couple of her smaller bags. Now let's take a look at the footwell. Some people complain that it might be a little narrow for them, and it might, but it was fine for me. Now let's take a look at the storage underneath the footwell, which had plenty of space for me to store my 25-liter backpack with room to spare. And right next to your seat, you had a small table platform area, which was very convenient to put your stuff on, as well as a slide-out mirror, which is for convenience and vanity. Next to that, you had storage with a sliding door with your complimentary water and your headphones, which we'll talk about later, 2 USB ports, and an AC power outlet. Now let's look at your tray table that can be used in half mode with a cup holder, or in full size, which actually provided plenty of space for eating or working, and you could easily slide it away in front of you, which was very convenient. Now let's take a look at the control panel on the side of your seat. First we'll take a look at the seat controls, which were very responsive and pretty much had every control you would need. Now, even though you had a touchscreen monitor, the remote control came in very handy, since most of the time I had my seat in recline or bed mode, and just like the touchscreen, the remote was very responsive. Now let's move to the other side of the seat where you have your personal lights, and here you have 3 options depending on what seat mode you're in. They're all basically the same light, just pointing in different directions. And you have an easily adjustable armrest that you can leave down for a little more space, or raise it up for a little comfort and a little bit of privacy. And if you needed it, you had ample storage space in the bins above your seat. And in addition to your personal lights, you had overhead lights, and noticeably missing are air vents, which is typical for many Singapore Airlines flights. And it wasn't really an issue for us, as the cabin was kept pretty comfortable throughout the flight. Now let's take a little look at some of the material in the rack next to your seat. And kudos to Singapore Airlines for using this bag for dual purpose: litter disposal and air sickness. Next you have your how to connect to the Wi-Fi guide. We'll touch base on this a little later in the video. Then you have your Chris Shop magazine, and of course you have your 78710 safety guide. Now let's look at the seat in full bed mode. I think in bed mode it was pretty comfortable. Now some people might be concerned about the width of the footwell when sleeping. I had no issue with the space. Here I am in recline mode, not full bed mode, and I had plenty of room to spare. But it also depends on which position you sleep in. Now, some people might ask, does the front row in business class have more room than the other rows? Let's take a look. Here we have seat 11A, front row by the window, and it does appear to have more space and extends to a wider footwell. At least that's what I can see without really bothering the woman sitting in that seat. And I should also mention that they provide you with some guidelines while sitting in a business class seat. Now let's take a look at the Singapore Airlines 78710's IFE system. You are provided with an 18-inch screen, which I think is more than sufficient on this short journey. And Singapore Airlines IFE system is generally pretty solid, with a large selection of media options and a wide variety of movies and new releases to choose from. And you also have the option to tilt the screen if you're in recline or full bed mode, just to make life a little easier. And here we'll scroll through some of the menu options just to give you an idea what's on their IFE system. We do dive a little deeper into the IFE system on other Singapore Airlines videos, so if you do want a more in-depth look into the IFE system here, we'll add a link to that video. Now we'll just quickly look through some of the movies offered on our flight. There were a lot to choose from, and they had options from multiple countries as well. And it should be fairly easy to find a movie to watch for this 2.5-hour journey. I found an interesting one. Now let's take a very quick look at the Wi-Fi on this flight. You get complimentary Wi-Fi in business class. We did not use the Wi-Fi on this flight, but we did on another Singapore Airlines flight, and it was fine for what we needed. And I'll add a link to that in case you want a more in-depth view of the Singapore Airlines Wi-Fi system. Now let's take a look at the amenities on this Singapore Airlines 78710 flight. Singapore Airlines takes a little different approach to amenities. Some of the amenities are only available upon request, which I guess is good for the environment and their bottom dollar. Here's a list of amenities you can request. For us, we just used the slippers because that's all we really needed. Although they did provide some amenities. Let's take a look. When you arrived at your seat, you had a blanket and pillow waiting for you. I kinda like the style of the pillow. For some reason, it reminded me of a fish. Anyway, it was soft and comfortable, and it was the perfect size for this bed. And the blanket was soft and plush and definitely good quality, and more than I probably needed for a 2.5-hour flight, but it was much appreciated. And here are the slippers. They were quite comfortable, but Lily might not agree that one size does fit all. And behind the sliding door in the cabinet next to your seat, alongside your charging ports, you have your complimentary water and headphones. And they provide you with this very convenient hook to hang your headphones when not in use. Now let's take a little closer look at the headphones provided. First off, you have these hygiene covers, in case you want to use them. These were high quality headphones and very comfortable. They came with a 3-prong jack. And in case you want to use your own 1-prong headphones here, what you can do is plug your jack in halfway, that way you'll receive audio in both ears. That's the hack that we use. And if you plug the jack in all the way, you'll usually only hear it in one ear. Now let's take a look at the food and drink on this flight. And since the flight was about 2.5 hours, we only received one meal, which was absolutely fine with us. We did eat in the lounge after all. And you can always go on the Singapore Airlines app or website before your flight to see what your options are for your in-flight meal, for your in-flight beverages, as well as your in-flight amenities. And you can usually book the chef on Singapore Airline flights over 1.5 hours. We didn't on this flight, but we did on our next flight from Singapore to Newark. And you could also order special meals if you have certain dietary restrictions. So when we first boarded the plane, they provided a warm towel to clean up and a welcome beverage. We both selected the champagne. They provide you with a menu on board. Let's take a quick look through it. You can see photos of some of the chefs and wine connoisseurs who contributed to this menu. Here they have a listing for a breakfast and a light lunch. On this particular flight, only the light lunch was served, and the menu was pretty close to what is written, except for the dessert. I believe that was different. And you could also page through the wines offered on this flight. Okay, I think it's time we dove into the meal we received on this flight. Wait a minute, where's the bread? Ah, that's better. We both coincidentally ordered the fish dish. The fish itself was fine, a little bland, but once you rounded it out with the salsa, the beans, and the vegetables, the overall dish was pretty good. Let's move on to the shrimp salad. I like shrimp, and I like salad, but the fact that they mixed the Caesar dressing in, that would make this a miss for me. I really wish they would have put the Caesar dressing on the side, but they didn't, so let's move on. They offered a variety of breads to choose from, which were fresh and tasty, and I really like when they provide you with some extra virgin olive oil, because I don't really use butter. I'm a bread and oil guy, so this was a win for me. Now, this dessert seemed to vary from what they mentioned in the menu. They listed a sticky date pudding with cream and butterscotch sauce, and this seemed to be some sort of light cake with a crumble topping, which was pretty good, so it was a win for me. And they provided you a plethora of silverware, more than I really needed, but it was appreciated, and a wet nap for after-meal cleanup. And I really did like these mini salt and pepper shakers. It's a nice touch. And the staff on board was quick to the draw when we needed a wine refill. Now that is service. Now let's take a look at one of the 4 business class bathrooms on this plane. And as I had mentioned in other videos, all I'm really looking for in a bathroom on a plane is that it's functioning, it's clean, and it's well stocked. But considering this is Singapore Airlines business class, I'm looking for a little more. Now, this was a short flight, but the bathroom was functioning, well stocked, and clean, and I also liked the feature of the foot pedal to open the garbage. And you did have some amenities here to choose from razors to sprays to mists to lotions. And I do really like the feature of the touchless flush toilet. And let's not forget about the signature flower in the Singapore Airlines bathroom. It's those little touches that make a difference. Like I had mentioned, this is a short flight, but I went back to my seat and reclined to full bed mode and tried to get a few minutes sleep before we landed. And that didn't really work too well. But that's okay. We were preparing to land 15 minutes early in Changi Airport, Singapore. And if you've never been to Changi Airport in Singapore and you have a layover here, you should definitely spend some time exploring this airport, especially the Jewel and the largest indoor waterfall in the world. We explored this airport and have a video out on top ways to stay entertained during a layover for free, like catching a free movie, take a ride on a giant slide, or just take a walk through one of the stunning garden exhibits they have at this airport. And once you arrive in Singapore, you'll find no shortage of incredible sights and experiences to truly amaze you. And if you care to join us, we set out to hit all the top attractions here to see which ones were worth it and which ones not so much. Now some final thoughts on Singapore Airlines 787-10's business class. The service was exceptional, as it consistently is. The food was above average, and the seats were quite comfortable. And what made this flight even more enjoyable is that we booked the entire flight on points. We thoroughly enjoyed this flight, and we would definitely fly Singapore Airlines business class again. In fact, we do. On an upcoming video, we have an 18+ hour flight from Singapore to Newark. I hope this helps you the next time you fly Singapore Airlines. Safe travels. If you enjoy traveling and like our videos, please subscribe, share, and like. We really do appreciate it, as it does help support the channel.